In this video, I'd like to go into why so many Americans have decided to move to and relocate down to Latin America. So most of them will be going to South America because there's just more countries there, to be honest. But some of them are also just simply going south across the border into Mexico and staying there. So why would Americans really be doing this? That's what I'd like to go into in this video, because a lot of people would think, well, there's a lot of immigrants coming from these South American and Central American countries to the United States. And they say they're coming to enjoy a better life. So why would Americans abandon this so-called better life and go to where these immigrants are coming from? That's what I'd like to talk about in this video. So the first thing a lot of people are escaping from is, quite frankly, the US politics. When you leave the US, you don't have to care about it anymore. Who cares what happens there? Who cares who gets elected? It just doesn't really matter to you all that much. So when you leave the US, you can just forget about it. If you're making like some business, if you're doing an online business or any sort of business, you can just kind of forget about the politics and focus on your business. So it's really just frees up a lot of time and mental energy, not having to worry about who's going to be president or what. And sure, you could say you might have to care about local politics, but truthfully, if you can't vote, you're not a citizen there, you don't have to care about it. It's not your business. You don't have to worry about it. And if things go wrong, you can just up and leave. So it's much more simple. When you don't have to care about politics, it just really improves your life. And that's one thing a lot of Americans are sick of. You're probably sick of it if you're American as well. It's just the politics. The politics in the US are just super toxic. It really doesn't benefit anyone. You don't really trust any of the politicians anyway. Like, they're not in your interest. They're just related to some donor or some corporate PAC. So just, who cares about it? Forget about it. Leave. And then it really doesn't even affect you anymore. So that's one big reason a lot of Americans leave and just enjoy being out of the US, because politics, it's terrible. The next big reason, and I'm putting this up front because it's one of the biggest reasons Americans leave, is, quite frankly, let's just call it social aspects. So in the United States, let's just say dating in particular, I hear really bad stories from pretty much all of the American people I know. The females, as well as the males, especially the males, because quite frankly, more of them move abroad, and I don't live in the US, I live abroad. So the stories I hear are just really bad. Basically, unless someone meets at like church or something, and they're like some weird kind of church people, unless they're that, pretty much all the relationships are incredibly toxic. They're all from like online dating apps, and they're all quite miserable. And just, quite frankly, everyone has so many other choices in their mind that they just keep trying to upgrade to the next best partner, and they never really take things too seriously. I don't know, the dating culture in the US is particularly toxic. So a lot of Americans are leaving down to South America and Central America because, quite frankly, the dating is apparently much better there. You can go there and date quite openly, as well as if you want to find an actual wife and like settle down more, it is much easier. Of course, some of this is because you come from kind of a unique demographic. Most local people in the area aren't going to be English speaking from some Western country, so you're a unique commodity. So people oftentimes seek out unique commodities, as well as you probably have more money than local people and different things like this, which can make dating a little bit easier. So this is one reason a lot of people go, but it's not just about dating. So, like, when I was down in South America, I didn't really do dating. I'm just going to be honest, I wasn't really interested in that at that time in my life, and I was more focused on making money in business and fitness. Because I was really out of shape, I just really needed to fix myself before trying to date and follow with any of that. So when I was down in South America, that's what I was focusing on. But the other side, like, other than dating, there's a lot of other social benefits in Latin America. Like, people are just generally more social, people enjoy life more, people are more relaxed and not as focused on work, making money, and grinding. So it allows you to have a better, like, balance of life. So while normally I just worked way too much, being down there, it gives you some, like, reprieve from it all. Like, a little bit of time where you're taken away from it because of the people you're surrounded by. It doesn't really matter if you're in a hostel or a hotel or an Airbnb. When you go outside, it seems like you always end up meeting people and bumping into people and being invited to different things. And I don't mean like nightlife sort of things. I also was never really interested in a lot of that stuff. Went to a little in Brazil, see how it was, but really it was more like, you would be invited to go to the beach, as an example, because I lived in Brazil 6 months, one of the Latin American countries, and down there, you would be invited to the beach. You'd be invited to just go hang out. You'd be invited to go play, like, I don't know what it's called, but it's like football mixed with volleyball. Yeah, so it's a very interesting thing. I enjoyed it. And you'd be invited to a lot of different things, as well as, of course, if you would just meet tons of different people. I'd go to the beach every day and lift weights, and down at the beach, there's this public area where you could lift weights and socialize and just enjoy. So it was a life down there is much more social generally. You're gonna encounter a lot more social circumstances. People are more chatty, people are more friendly, people are more open, people enjoy life more than in the US. So just being down there, it's not just about dating for a lot of people, it's also about just general their social life and the balance of life you have. It's just much, much better in Latin America. The third thing would be the living costs. So the living costs in Latin America, pretty much any Latin American country, is going to be much, much, much cheaper than pretty much anywhere in the US. So if you want to go live in some small town in Oklahoma, go ahead, it's not going to be too much more expensive there. But if you want a better quality of life, access to fresher fruit, vegetables, better social life, better atmosphere, and just more opportunities, then anywhere pretty much in Latin America is going to be better and cheaper, or a similar price to a rural place in Oklahoma. If you come from a city, any city pretty much in the US, it's going to be much, much cheaper in Latin America. So of course there are some more expensive places in Latin America, so say like Panama City, it's not the cheapest place, or like I mentioned before, Brazil and Rio de Janeiro, it's not the cheapest place, but for what you get and the quality of your life, I'd say it's much, much better. But most of Latin America is much, much cheaper. And that's why a lot of Americans move there, because you can save 50% of your income quite easily if you work online or something like this, or have your own business. You can save the majority of your income and invest it, or invest in a business and stocks and whatever you want really. And it really boosts your life and allows you to like regrow your family's wealth. Like a lot of people come from really poor families. I kind of did as well. And just having that ability to save a lot of money and invest it really allows you to just pick your whole family tree up. Like if you want, you can, after many, many years of doing it, investing and stuff, you could maybe even retire family members if you choose. But those are of course just examples. If you want to just go on some fancy vacations or do whatever you want, it's up to you, it's your money. But like the living costs in Latin America really just frees up you. It just gives you more freedom, allows you to do more stuff and contribute more or invest more. Really, it takes a lot of stress off your plate. If you want to start a business, you have a lower burn rate. You don't need to make as much money to really continue your lifestyle. So if your business isn't really taking off too much, you're gonna be fine as long as you're making something. And then eventually, if you want to keep investing in a business, maybe it takes off and you do very well. So like it just gives you more opportunity being in Latin America. I mean, next thing a lot of Americans like, and just generally people like, I know a lot of Europeans that also moved down to South America and Latin America, is the food. Quite frankly, the food in the US, they have pretty good food now, let's be fair. The restaurants aren't too bad, the frozen grocery store items aren't too bad, but in Latin America, the fresh fruit and vegetables is far, far better, way cheaper of course, but far better quality as well. Like the fruits are sweeter, the vegetables just, I don't know, they're just better quality. It's clear that they're more, let's just say, organic or grown on small farms, and it's just I don't know, the quality of the produce and food is just much better, as well as just the taste of it's better. People use seasoning down in Latin America, they use spices, they make tastier stuff. A lot of the US still, they don't let's just say they don't have the most flavorful food. Like nothing really beats being able to walk outside your apartment or hotel or Airbnb or whatever you got and just being able to buy freshly made foods and products. Like in the US, if you want to buy, one example, like I'm from Texas, I grew up, when I was like a teenager, I started to eat quite a bit of like Mexican food and Hispanic food, Tex-Mex food, and one thing I started to like is like tortillas. In the US, it's kind of hard to find fresh tortillas. If you want, you can go to like a Mexican supermarket and kind of get semi-fresh tortillas, like they're made that week. It's okay. But like in Mexico, when I actually stayed in Mexico, you could just walk outside within 5-10 minute walk of anywhere you were in Mexico City, you would run into a tortilla shop and they would be spitting out 50 tortillas for just a couple dollars, freshly made right there, baked right in front of you. And they were just delicious, really soft, really fluffy, just much, much better quality than anything I ever had in the US. And just having access to fresh goods like that, like that's just an example in Mexico. That example really follows through pretty much everywhere in Latin America, depending on the country. So if you're in Argentina and you like meat, particularly stuff like steak, you're going to find a lot of it there. It's going to be very fresh. It's going to be mostly like grass-fed sort of stuff. If you're in Brazil, to a lesser extent, you will also have like your steak stuff, but you'll also have a lot of other just... Brazil kind of grows everything. We have a quite diverse food culture, so you're going to have just a lot of stuff that's fresh, to be quite honest. But like Latin America just has much fresher food, much more homemade food than America. And it's something that really just improves the quality of life significantly. The next thing a lot of people leave the United States for and move to a place like Latin America for is taxes. So taxes, when you leave the US, if you're a US citizen, unfortunately you're still gonna have to pay U.S. taxes. You're still gonna have to pay tax to the United States because you're their property. But otherwise, you don't have to pay taxes really much anymore if you're from another country and you move to Latin America. But you Americans, you still will have to pay taxes to the U.S. government. But you can take a significant deduction. So if you're employed, if you're self-employed, it sounds good. If you're self-employed, you still end up having to pay at least 20%. But if you're employed by someone and you're working remotely, you can take a foreign earned income exclusion for something around like $120,000, $130,000 of a tax deduction. So you can take this exclusion and basically make your money effectively tax-free. Like your employer will still pay your Social Security and Medicaid or Medicare, and yeah, they'll still have to pay that, so that kind of gets deducted out of your paycheck on your back end, but you don't really have to think about that too much. You can take a deduction and not really pay any taxes out of your pocket, which is something that's quite good, quite good. Of course, not being a U.S. citizen is better, but hey, there are some trade-offs, but it is one of the biggest tax advantages you can take as a U.S. citizen, and it's one of the easiest. Another thing I've heard a lot of Americans moving down to, like, all of these are kind of like factors that are included in why they're moving down there. But another reason is it's far away from a lot of the drama and the chaos. Like, if you're down in South America, especially South America, but if you're down in, especially in the southern cone, like Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, to a lesser extent, maybe southern Brazil, you don't have to worry about anything. You're way out of all the drama. You're outside the U.S. You're outside of Europe. You're outside of anywhere any sort of wars are going on, any conflicts where a lot of immigration's happening too. You're just down there in a place no one really cares about too much. So if you're down there, you're out of the drama. You don't have to think about it. And similarly with your politics, it just takes a lot of, like, it provides relief for a lot of people. It allows them to just focus on their business or themselves and not really have to worry about what's happening anywhere too much. Finally, I'd like to talk about one of the last reasons I know a lot of Americans move down to South America and Latin America for, which is, quite frankly, to start a new life. So a lot of Americans, they grew up with bad families, or they're not really happy with the direction their life went. Maybe they got married and got a divorce and things didn't work out very well there. Maybe they have been dating the U.S. and it hasn't really worked out. Maybe they've went to college, got in tons of debt, got some degree, and then went and worked a job they don't really like, and they're just not even able to really save money. Maybe it's just, they just don't really share much in common with a lot of people in the U.S. and they just don't really like the way of life. Whatever it is, a lot of them will go down to Latin America simply to start a new life. Because you go down there, you break away from your friend group, your family, if you want to. You can break away from everything and just start a truly new life. You can be who you want to be. So if you want to go down and be Mr. Jim and become a bodybuilder, no one's going to criticize you for it. None of your family's going to be like, hey, no, you shouldn't be doing that. What are you doing with your life? No, you're going to be down there. You're going to be the bodybuilder. That can be your image if you want it to be. You can go down there and be the digital nomad guy. You can go down there and be pretty much whoever you want. And that's one thing I noticed when I was down in Latin America. I met a lot of people who, quite frankly, just reinvented themselves. Before, they were just some guy, some normal guy who lived a normal life and really, they weren't too satisfied by it. When they moved down to Latin America, some of them only for 6 months or a year and then moved back, but they moved down and they decide, you know what, I'm going to try a different life out. I'm going to try being some very comedic guy, some funny guy who's very loud and outgoing instead of kind of shy and reserved. They decide to just be out there. And that's one thing a lot of people are leaving the U.S. for, is just when you're abroad, you can kind of forget about everything and forget a lot of the social consequences. You don't have to worry about what friends think, what family thinks, what any sort of community you're in thinks, because you're out of it. You can kind of behave how you want and try different things out. If you don't have to repress who you truly are. You can figure it out, you can express it, and you can see how you feel, being how you feel you actually are. So that's one of the last things where people actually leave and really stay away from the U.S. and relocate down to South America for, is just to build a new life, to get out there, to get new social circles, to essentially reinvent themselves. Because it can be hard to, like example, being, if you want to start an online business, it can be hard to quit your job in the U.S., stay at home, and have all your friends and family say, oh man, this is a really bad decision, while you try to start your own business. It's better to just get in a positive environment. Go down to a place like Brazil or Mexico and just start a business there and say, hey, I'm someone who is trying to do this and try to do the business. No one's going to really put you down when you're in a place like that. They might not look up to you because you're just starting out, but they're not going to put you down. Like, you will have an easier time trying it out and trying to do something that you've wanted to do for a long time. So that's one of the big reasons why people leave to South America and Latin America. And you know what, one more thing, I don't know, I kind of alluded to this the whole video, but another reason people are relocating down there is because they go on vacation just a week, 2 weeks to see how it is, or just to get away from the US, experience a different culture. And they realize, hold on a second, life in the US is getting worse. Like, prices are up a lot, they're not making too much more usually from like a job, expenses are up, crime's up, like everything's just kind of falling apart in the US. But you go down to Latin America, things aren't well put together, mind you. Like, there's quite a bit of crime in a lot of South America as well. But you'll go down to a lot of the countries and you'll see, like, wait a sec, crime is going down. Expenses are staying relatively the same. Building quality is going up. Like, basically, things are staying the same or they're getting better in Latin America. While in the US, things are getting worse. And just to be in a place where things are getting better is really, really attractive. So that's one of the other things. A lot of people go, just leave the US because the US is going downhill. Latin America, it's not doing fantastic, but a lot of the places are going up. So some of the places, like one big example would be Argentina. In my opinion, they're really improving a lot right now. They got a new president that really enjoys freedom and let's just say, is trying to really improve the Argentine economy and try to like fix it, try to get rid of a lot of regulations and bureaucracy. And this is something that in the US is unthinkable. No one's doing this. Even if like Trump gets elected and all of this, he's still not going to get rid of tons and tons of bureaucracy. He's not going to get rid of tons of stuff. Like, if you want certain things like that, being down in a place like Argentina is just simply better. Things are getting better there versus in the US. Things are getting worse, quite frankly, especially from a social and economic perspective. And finally, I'd like to briefly touch on where people are moving to in Latin America. So Americans primarily are moving to Costa Rica because it has good residency programs and stuff, but a lot of them don't actually live there too much. What most Americans actually prefer to be in is Mexico, Colombia, and to a lesser extent, Argentina. So Mexico is really your all-around place. Most Americans like it because it's kind of similar to home. It has like Walmart, it has Amazon, it has a lot of big box stores. So it's overall, like if you're from like a southern state like Texas or I don't know, southwestern state, you're used to a lot of like Mexican people and Hispanic people. So if you go down to Mexico, it doesn't feel too much different than home, quite frankly. Like, obviously it's different, it's more busy, there's fresher fruit, vegetables, foods, more homemade goods like I mentioned before, but it doesn't, you're not going to have as much of a culture shock as going to a place like Brazil. Brazil, it's going to be completely different, it's going to be a mess for you. So that's one reason a lot of Americans like Mexico in particular. And you can just fly a couple hours to see family in the US and fly back if you want to. Another place a lot of them like would be Colombia. Colombia, it's mostly due to the social aspects, primarily the dating there. So the other social aspects in Colombia are kind of questionable. Dating, though, apparently is very good. Short-term dating, not like serious dating, it seems like. So anyhow, I'm not really a big fan of Colombia, but it's an okay place, especially if someone's looking for that. My preferred place would be in the southern cone, all the way south, which would be Argentina. And the reason why it's more of a family place, as well as it's a safer place than most of Latin America. It has less crime, the streets are cleaner, buildings look nicer, people keep up to them more, people are more educated and quite frankly civilized, people dress nicer and behave better, in my opinion. As well as they have, in my opinion, a better climate and better nature, lower pollution, all of that. So they got mountains, they got beach, they got flatlands, they got tons of varieties of nature, they got tons of different varieties of climate, and they just really, I don't know, I'm really attracted and pulled towards Argentina. As well as, of course, they have a new, like, libertarian or, like, free-minded president who really just embraces freedom, deregulation, and stuff like this, so the overall country's getting much, much better, in my opinion. But yeah, I kind of just prefer Argentina. Most Americans prefer, if they're family-oriented, probably Argentina. If they're like want just short-term dating and screwing around, probably Colombia. And if they're just a well-balanced individual, usually it's like around Mexico or somewhere in Central America, such as Costa Rica. Those are generally the spots where Americans kind of accumulate. Of course, you can go to Ecuador or Peru or something, but it's just there's less expats there. People don't choose it as much just because it doesn't have quite the level of access, especially in terms of flights to other countries, and just generally not as easy and it's not as well known how to live there and get around. So yeah, that's really going to be all for the video. If you have any thoughts or questions regarding living in one of these countries or moving to Latin America, feel free to leave those down below and I'll try to get back to you. But with that being said, bye bye.